pleasure for me to be here and to share with you all this something that is my passion, that is about how we can use innovation to do something good at the same time. So I'll start with something that happened to me beginning of this year, and well, at the end of last year and beginning of this year. So basically, with my 3 daughters and my wife, we decided to write down all our wishes for next year, for 2020. And that was a very particular experience, because at that time, my daughters, they had 8, 10, and 12 years old, and then they were asking, why do we have to do that? I mean, what is the meaning? But they took it as a game, and then they started to write their intention for next year. And we put it into small strips that we hang into the Christmas tree. So that was also a way to decorate the Christmas tree. Something also that they do in Japan for hanging the wishes on trees. So I thought it was a good idea to do it as a game. So next year, so beginning of January 2020, this year, we took out all of these strips, and then we started to read them. And what was very, well, when you do that with kids, it's very funny, because you can have very interesting things like this message that I got. Like, well, I hope you, daddy, become less grumpy. I'm not sure it's so easy to get. But we got also things like, well, normal wishes, like that people wanted a better house, things like that. But what really was very, very surprising to me, that my little daughter of 8 years, she said, well, I hope we can pollute less. So there is something going on her mind. And the 10-year-old girl, Natalie, she said, well, I wish we could stop climate change, the climate gets better, so that we can stop with the problem of climate change that is happening all the time, and she's hearing all the time. So this made me think about what is going on the kids' mentality, because when I had their age, I couldn't care less about environment or pollution. I was just concerned about whether I am going to have a nicer gift, or I would have time to play with my friends. So things are changing quite a lot, and the new generation are really getting very, very, putting a lot of attention on what is going on with our environment. And this brings me to the heart of this presentation, that is the world where we're living today, and what we can do with all this that we are producing, all this waste and all these externalities, as we used to call it in normal language. So I typically like to ask this question to companies. So what would they do differently if they were responsible for collecting all the products they sold? And this is a very tough question, and you can get very particular answers, because when people start to think what they would do with the product they sell when the product reaches their end of their lifetime, then the thinking is you start to push some boundaries, and then you start to think, well, I mean, not all these products are very good for the environment, and in the end, this can cause a lot of problems. So if you think about cars, for instance, I mean, what happens with all these cars and all these parts that are roasting around? The same for electronics, the same for many other products that we produce. And there is a big gap. So the big gap between the way we understand our day-to-day life and our advancement and progress, and what is actually going on the world, and on the impact we are producing on the world. So this is also leading to major changes, and people are thinking now, for instance, to spend, this is just one of the examples that I found in the internet, so 1.8 trillion in investment by 2030 just to adapt to climate change in 5 particular directions, but not talking about all the other issues that we need to also adapt to. So what is happening is that we're extracting massive amount of resources our economy is based on extraction. So we attach value to extracting and trading those extracting materials. This is also causing a lot of biodiversity loss. And we are also inducing social shortfall. So we are able to send very nice rockets outside of the planet, but we are not able to solve problems like access to potable water. So we are living in a beyond our means, beyond our planetary boundaries. And one interesting thing to look at is the Earth overshoot. So overshoot means the amount of material or resources that we can take from the Earth on a yearly basis that the Earth can restore. And every year we take more and more, and this day overshoot start to be closer and closer to January. So if we go to, for instance, 50 years back, so 1970s, we were able to live in average with the resources of one planet during the year, which was enough. Today, after 50 years, we need 1.6 planets in average. So there are countries like Belgium, where I live, that we need 3 planets to live in 1 year. At the same time, our GDP has exploded. We go from roughly $20 trillion to now 90 US dollars. So the GDP is not necessarily correlated to the amount of the harm we're causing to the Earth. And unfortunately, the innovation waves that have been happening, so that have been disrupting our lives since the 70s, they have not been able to reverse this trend, this negative trend. So that's, as somebody that is working intimately in innovation, I'm also concerned about what we can do with innovation so we can reverse the trend. So apparently we are very good at destructing and damaging our ecosystem, and that might be also possible to revert. But first we have to be aware of this. And we are also throwing away a lot. So this year is the first year where we went beyond 100 billion tons of extracted material. And this is really something that we need to understand as not a very good thing. We shouldn't be very proud of it, because only 9% of this material is recycled. So if we make the math, it means that 270,000 times the Empire State buildings are wasted. They're just disposed, and we are not making use of it. And this is very sad. But what is the real problem behind it is that we are stuck into an old linear innovation model. And this is also a linear thinking model. Our brains are thinking in a linear way. We lack the faculty to see around the big picture, which means that we basically take materials and extract materials to make products that we use and dispose. And along this value chain, basically we pollute. We pollute with chemicals, we pollute with the CO2 that these products emit. And also more and more we want to use them less and less. We want to use the less cell phones. So basically we don't use our product the whole lifetime, but we try to change it as much as possible. And this also increases the amount of extraction that we are causing to our system. So I also ask myself a question. I mean, what would I do if I had to invest my money today? And you can also ask the same question, where will you put the money? If you had to decide today, I mean, companies where you can bet that they will take care and they will be a good investment, so your family can have in the future and future generations a safe place to stay and live in Earth. So I was looking around in internet and I said, well, what are the most valuable brands and what they're doing? So you can have, for instance, Google, Apple, Facebook. But if you start thinking about all these companies, are they going to be investing the money in the right direction? I'm not so sure. I mean, also Coca-Cola, Nike, all these brands, I'm not sure they will be there within the next 20 to 30 years, because we are not sure if there will be enough resources for them to grow as they are trying to grow, like exponential. So yeah, what type of companies will be there maybe in the future that will be, and how they will think, what will be their philosophy? So I think after this reflection, I would invest mainly in companies that are looking at the industrial and technological capacity, so developing their technical skills, but at the same time, supporting the capabilities that produce life in the earth. So this means that they are also looking at how to create cleaner atmosphere, abundant clean water, fertile soils, more rainforest, more biodiversity, and also provide fair work for communities, because all of this is the key for us to keep our planet where we live alive for longer generations. So, well, but how we move to this new model? How can we create something that can bring us to this new place where we want to go? And for me, I think the answer is regenerative innovation. What does it mean? So regeneration comes from biology. In biology, regeneration means that you recreate, you bring life again into a body. And this is inspired, this graph here is inspired into what Bill Reed thinks, and which is a thinker and somebody that is working on regenerative design for the built environment, but is also applicable to many other fields in innovation. So in this graph, you can see that we are working in a degenerating system. So we are basically working in a linear thinking, reductionist, and this conventional way of doing things is just based on extraction. So when we hear things like, well, green technologies or sustainable technologies, these are trends towards less extraction and less degeneration. But sustainability on itself is just not, is making less bad. It's not about or stopping to pollute, but it's nothing about what we can do to improve our earth. And so when we talk, for instance, about meeting Paris agreements or EU Green Deal or Sustainable Development Goals, we are just in the part of the axis that is in the center here. And this will not ensure that our next generations will have the same quality of life we have today, because they will just have, in the best case, something that is half dead. Now, the way to go is just to go beyond the sustainability. And beyond the sustainability means restorative thinking or even regenerative. So going again to regeneration is thinking in a systemic way, but in a systemic way where you not only think about the systems of mechanics or technological system, but you also integrate the system composed of humans and also of animals. So that we see in an holistic way our system where we live. And for instance, circular economy is also a concept that is going on the right direction. Circular economy considers that we are doing things in circular, so feedback loops, but circular economy is not integrating the human aspect. So what happens with humans? It's not into that picture. One important thing for people that are working in innovation is that when we go to a more, the better side of the innovation, so the regeneration, it's about also thinking how we can use less in general, so less energy, less materials. And this is basically mimicking a bit the nature. And I think we, in the thinking of, in the past webinar, somebody was talking about biomimicry. Biomimicry is the art of imitating nature. Now, imitating nature on itself is not the best, it's not guarantee that you are going to really regenerate our ecosystem, because you can also continue using these ideas from nature just against nature. So it's really about having a paradigm shift, thinking in a different way solve the problems that we created. So like Einstein once said, if we want to solve the problems that we created with a certain way of thinking, we need to change the way of thinking. And this is basically our challenge if we want to stay here longer than our generation. Now, what are the examples? So I like to, for instance, just take very maybe well-known cases like mining, that nobody really likes mining, and what technology can do about it. So mining is really not very popular in Europe and maybe also in other developed countries. Why? Because we think that it's dirty. We have a lot of these very, very ugly mining pits. But at the same time, we depend on mining because all of our technology, all of our modern life depends extremely on mining, and we need more and more diverse type of elements to be able to create the technology for our green tech, for our LEDs, for our cell phones. So basically, mining is something that will stay there for longer. But what about the technology that we have also in other fields like data analytics and drones? Can we do something about it? What do you think? So basically, we can do a lot. We can think of technology as a way to enable restoration of mining pits. That's an example. And this is a very interesting and inspiring example from a startup that is already growing quite a lot, receiving, I think they're already in the second investment run from the UK called Dendra Systems. And basically they have the dream to plant trees, 500 billion trees by 2060. And how? But this is only one of their thinking is using drones that basically they shotgun the trees seeds into places where they want to grow trees. And basically they are basically taking the problem of the ecosystem damage as an opportunity. So they see the problem of 2 billion of hectares degraded as an opportunity. They see this as a market. And it's a very good market because it basically has 700% growth estimated within the next 10 years. And they evaluated roughly a $400 billion market today. So, and this lady with I think there are already 20 people, they have some challenges, like for instance, scale. So when you have to restore problems of mining, you basically are confronted to three main challenges that are scale, so the very large surface, and also very small details that you need to take into account. Lack of access to this data from sites. So the sites, the way they are managing this is with very traditional ways. So they send people around, and it takes a lot of time, and the growth, basically the advancement of this regreening is really taking very, very low. So basically they are using drones to speed up the seeding. So they are capable of being very, very efficient, much more efficient than the best organization reforesting the forest around the world. But at the same time, they are helping the mining companies and other sectors as well to comply with the legislation. The legislation is obliging them to, after they finish their operations, to leave the mining sites as they found it. Another example of regenerative innovation. So education. Why education is important? Education is basically the core of our problem today. The linear thinking is the basic of the problem. And generation like me or older, I think they are not so concerned about decarbonizing the economy. And basically this idea here is how we can educate the younger generation that are much more, as we see with my daughters, they're much more concerned about that, maybe because they will have the problems in the future. how we can educate them so they are carbon literate, so they can also be energy efficient literate, and then they can influence the future, because we will be confronted with for instance, if we want to move out of fossil fuel, we will need to live with sources of energy that are very variable. So we will need to adapt, we will need to develop many other new innovations to live with these sources that are different. So in this case, they took also data analytics and solar panels to change the education system. How they did it? Anybody has a clue? So basically, they created a system where basically the solar energy, they rent the roofs of the schools just to benefit from this energy, and by selling this energy, they generate enough revenue to deliver these trainings to the schools, because the educational system has very little means to pay for this. But at the same time, they see a very important return on investment. And the return is that these people that will be trained on how they can use the solar energy to produce electricity, they will also be confronted, the students will be educated on how they can themselves do projects on how to be more efficient with the energy and so on. They see this as a main investment for the future, because they see that these students, these kids, they will influence their parents, and by influencing their parents, they will get very quick the result they expect. Because as we know today, if your kids, they ask you something for Christmas, they typically 100% of the time they have it. And today there is no parent that want to say no to their kids. So it's a very good idea, and then they are very ambitious. They want to install this educational system powered with solar cells, revenue very quick. They want to do it at a very high scale. And here we have another one, regenerative innovation on the construction sector. So what we can do with mushrooms and a community. So we have a very interesting bio-inspiring social solution. So here is about how we can use mushrooms to generate the insulation of buildings, and also these buildings are made with parts that do not require any type of construction system, like system so all these systems, they are interlocking, so you don't need to put any material, you don't need to put glues, and they are very robust at the same time. And yet the last one that I will talk about now is how you can do regenerative innovation with a problem that causes environmental issues, like the paddy straw burning in India. In India, there is a big issue with burning paddy straws. They are burning like 20 million tons of this per year. And the good thing is that this residue can be also considered as a raw material for producing very green biosource, recyclable and recycled materials for the built environment. So for building any type of furniture, for decoration. And how this happened is by this startup that is called Ecor in the Netherlands. They basically collaborated with DSM Niaga, that is a chemical company in the Netherlands, where they developed a special glue that is also biosourced and recyclable. And with this, they are able to make these nice panels. Yeah, I still have another one that is about plastic, so blockchain and an ecosystem. So basically, this is a way to do circular plastic, and the issue with recycling plastics and decreasing the amount of waste that we see on the oceans is a problem about the consistency of this material, so all this plastic, and the reliability. So how we can be sure that this plastic that are going around, they don't have toxins, or they don't have product that are undesirable. So the chemical industry decided to start looking for standards for transparency and traceability. And this company called Circularize, they came up with a solution using blockchain technology for a decentralized system for traceability. And they are capable to do interesting things like help people or companies that are in the same sector in chemicals to source circular products, so to be sure that what they are sourcing is traceable, so they know exactly the passport of the product. They are capable of incentivize the suppliers to produce more products that are traceable, but also that are circular, that you can use endless, and also allow you to work more in the circular system to help companies to encourage like the take back of products, so that at the end of their lifetime they can take it back. And because they know all the composition of this product based on the blockchain, they can be able to know exactly how they can recuperate that into their processing. And I want to just cite Ray Anderson, a very well-known person in the sustainable innovation. So he says sustainability is not only the right thing to do, but the right thing to do for business. And he's already passed away, but in his life, in the last 50 years, he went from 0 to 1 billion turnover, because this is a company he developed himself. So now time for reflection. Why it is valuable for your organization, do you think, to work with a regenerative innovation mindset? And now I would like to open the floor for discussion. So please just turn on your camera and just pop in and raise your hand, or dare to talk if you want.
And if you don't want to talk, you can always use your chat.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where you're coming, any ideas as to whether you already may have an organization concern or see the opportunities? Come on, we are between us. No idea.
And do you find valuable already this type of approach? It's not such a difficult question to start with.
Yes, from my side, yes, for sure I do. But the question is every time to find how to go to this kind of, let's say, mindset to turn, let's say, the challenges we could have in the business and to come up with some regenerative innovation idea. That's, for example, I'm from rubber industry. So we know that, for example, rubber is very, very difficult to manage and to recycle. So the question is, yes, how to turn this challenge to really to regenerative innovation.
So the problem
the idea is very, very interesting now to find to get the let's say the applicable
yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's.
And maybe you have to start with what are your main concerns, what are your main sustainability concerns, and take it from there. See if there are opportunities hidden. Like most of the cases is when they start with something that it was causing a big pain. the rubber industry, you are into the raw material producing, or you are already producing?
Both raw material and also product, so component from rubber. And
there is
when you have transformed rubber, you know that the tire, for example, I'm not in the tire industry, but yeah. We know that the issue of all this tire around the world where we do not know what to do with. So I think that's something.
Very interesting case.
Yeah.
There is Michelin. He's decided to start renting the tires for big trucks because they think they can repair it.
Yeah. I know that this is something, and there are some startup with the Internet of Things which are putting some devices into to manage exactly the lifetime of the tires.
And the same I heard for tires from airplanes. That they are working with a system where they recover, they take back the tires, they repair it, and then they resell it. Because it's a very big investment just to throw them away. They're still very good.
Exactly. And the quantity is very, very big. I know that, for example, for the moment, we are just sending the scrap somewhere in the world, but something needs to be thinking.
Yeah, but the same. I see a lot of, for instance, plastic. Plastic is considered as a big enemy of environment because we are hearing all the time about this plastic soup, the plastic in the oceans. But at the same time, there are many interesting cases where they are recycling plastic, for instance, in textile.
Exactly.
There is a good consortium where they're recycling. They went from 1 to 100%, and what they are doing is they're applying rules. The design rules just for making this easy to recycle. Like, for instance, not to mix things that are difficult to separate. By applying these rules, then it's easier for them to recycle and keep it on the loop as much time as possible. And then the company becomes interested in the raw material, and then they start to rent it because they say, well, it will be easy to get it back. And by doing so, they are very efficient, and then at the same time they make more revenue, and also they are hedging against the price volatility because raw materials volatility is high.
Exactly. This is a big challenge also for automotive industry, because I'm also part of automotive industry, is how to recycle the mixed materials. So they are trying to do things when you can separate the material one from the others, then you can recycle, let's say, each material, textile separately and plastic separately. So this is also one of the big challenges.
The trend is the same in all industries. Also in construction. In construction, one of the things is to develop very good system to filters or to separate sorts. But the smarter people, they are just thinking on a design that is, in the end, the effect is that it is easier to work because they work with less material. The solution is to maybe work with 1 or 2 materials that are easy to separate.
Exactly.
And then you have a lot of things like, for instance, design for disassembly. Also, you have systems that when you switch temperature, they completely change form, and then they are easy to separate. So there are many tricks that can be applied from other fields. Anyway. Okay, so we have another person apparently that wants to give some feedback. Cecilia Ercoli.
I'm quite interested in what you said. First of all, thank you very much. I was very interested by the approach, and especially when you were talking about the culture. Like, it's true that we can find a lot of technical solutions at some point. But we have 2 issues here. The first is the systemic thinking, because sometimes the solution we find creates more problem than solve. And the other thing is the culture of business people. I mean, this kind of, we are still stuck a lot into this competition kind of approach and linear and competitive culture. So that I was thinking about, I'm interested nowadays in building hybrid ecosystems. And the idea was, thinking of working on how already as human beings we should think of regenerative for ourselves. What I mean is that we push ourselves so far most of the time, I mean in business, that we don't, you know, people have burnouts all the day, you know, and how can we start from the actual human being and all the people within the companies to change this kind of approach already for ourselves, and then it will be little for the community within the business and for the business in a bigger scale, you know, just like a fractal kind of system. And I feel like we can find a lot of technical solutions, but what's missing is this awareness of what makes us a system and an ecosystem. And how, I mean, did you find this kind of questions, and how do you answer them?
Yeah, it's very good, and I really love this question. Thank you very much, because it's the essence of where we are today. One of the important persons in this field that developed this thinking about you know, the degenerative to regenerative, he says climate change is the best thing that could happen to humanity. Why? Because this is making us think about what are our relations to the environment. And what you mentioned is within the context that in a system, most of the time, it's not the parts alone that are important, but it's the connection, it's the wholeness. Like when you look at ants are very simple parts, but they can do incredible things. So for instance, when they have two different separate objects, they can assemble themselves into a bridge for the other ants to cross over. And this means that we have this means that these are examples of systemic thinking, and this is what we are I think talking about the underneath discussion here. And what happens is that today we have two worlds. We have the world that thinks that technology is going to save us. So the techno fix. Basically, we are waiting for the technology that will absorb all the CO2 from the emissions and will save us. So it means that we don't have to do anything. And on the other side, there is
a sign for the COVID-19. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That could be another one. On the other side, we have the humanity. I mean, we are also part of this big system, and we can do something. So technology is not that it's not okay. Technology is part of the solution, but it's not the solution. And this is a big difference in this type of innovation. That how we can curb this trend about the GDP. The only measure that we have of progress is GDP, and by doing that, we are going probably. It's a problem of thinking. We think that more GDP is better, but if we start to be aware that technology is part of the solution, but it's not the solution, we would start thinking about maybe that the communities is important. So we have a lot of social and anthropological studies that show that, for instance, the communities, that the Aborigines, they are the best stewards for forest. They are the ones that can work better, that they benefit from it, and they can really take care of it. And there are a lot of cascading result of this keeping the forest with this Aborigines taking care of it, that create a lot of good results, positive results for the whole environment and for the community. So the thing is how we can bring it to the corporates and how we can help them maybe find their purpose. Because when they connect and they become aware, I think all this will disappear. All these problems that we have, the linear thinking, will disappear. But this is also step by step, because you cannot go from 0 to 100% just like that. It doesn't work. We are not machines. We need to take it slowly.
Jean-Paul?
You're right about the KPIs. I think we have a huge topic around KPIs in the business. You know, how can we put in place those kind of new hybrid KPIs that can help the business to drive actions in a different way?
Okay, Veronique, you were saying?
Yeah, I have two comments, and I plead guilty because I love to use my latest stuff, and so I'm not a very good try to, but don't always succeed. But you gave an example of mining and regenerative. I have two questions actually. You gave an example with mining, and you said, well, there is this startup that seeds the old mining sites. What I thought that regenerative innovation was because it's fixing a problem that has already caused trouble, right? And we know that very often this replanting and reseeding is done with plants that grow fast, that it's not at all the same natural ecosystem. So I thought that regenerative innovation was actually avoiding the damage. And for me,
for sure.
planting was, I mean, it's good. It's a fix.
The idea is to, in the end, is to regenerate the nature as and the system, our spaceship as it was maybe 300 years ago. Now, what you mentioned is true. I mean, this startup is starting to do something about this problem, and they're going to restoration, they call it. It's better than nothing. It's better than just sustainability. But of course, the idea would be is to think how we can maybe turn the economy into a more circular economy. So we can already work with all this waste we create. It doesn't, we divert it from landfill and we keep using it. And in the meantime, we avoid extracting more. And if we create the right legal and business incentive, I'm sure this could be possible, but we need to change the mentality of policymakers and more people for this to happen. So completely agree with you. So this is a problem of linear thinking. Linear thinking is like reductionist, and you say, yeah, the problem is this, we fix it with that, no problem.
Right. So it's a first step. I mean, it's better than nothing. So I understand. I really loved your slide where you showed this big bubble with the highest market cap values, these companies. And it's kind of shocking to see that actually the top, I mean, we know it, but to see it on the slide that the top market cap are actually not at all the ones that are too good for the planet. But one of the questions you had in the presentation is what if you had to actually recycle or deal with the waste you generate? But some of these companies are actually not material. They generate data. I mean, if we take Google, they don't actually produce material, right, that they can recycle. Yet, in a way, they generate a lot of pollution. We know that we use a lot of energy with data centers. And so how do you see these big players play a role in this regenerative innovation?
So first, I think that this big bubble with all these big market cap companies today, we are not sure they will be there within the next 10 to 20 years. It's like if you take the same snapshot, like 20 years ago, who was there? You had like General Electric, or you had the Exxons of this world. All these companies, I mean, today that they are based on fossil fuels, they are not anymore in the big picture, or they are much less important. So things also change. What I see happening is, and this is what the analysts say that are in innovation, is that they say the big corporates is a model that is like is prehistoric. It's not going to last. What I hope it will happen, we will go to a logic of the commons, like with a lot of peer-to-peer interactions, because in the end, regeneration is about mimicking life, and how life is a decentralized system that is systemic, and where each of the parts can work and adapt to the problem of their environment. So hopefully we also will be we will see a bubble where probably the KPI is not GDP, but it is also how better we make our spaceship Earth, and how better we make our community. Maybe companies that are preoccupied with the purpose. Why don't we have any company that is preoccupied with the purpose of people there? Is it not important? Maybe we have being too much obsessed with putting success like, putting money as equal to success, but we all start to see that it's not the only measure, right?
But it's more difficult to measure. I mean, those...
Yeah, for the reductionist approach, when we are reductionist anatomists, we only like one number. But if we start to think differently, probably we would like to see other things there. Who knows?
I wish you were right. Okay.
Question.
Good for thought.
Is it anybody from the other auditors, like Christophe? We have some Marine Monteroc and Eve Le Picard. Do you guys want to jump in and bring some thoughts? No, not necessarily. I could continue, but I think the discussion is good. I think in the end, it's a bit more of the same, and I think is.
You can go ahead with the rest of your presentation, Jean-Paul.
Okay,
I think people love examples anyway.
Okay,
I can find it inspiring.
Good. So that will be very quick. So it's what are the main disciplines? In my perspective, is about connect, rethink, repurpose, and new business models like products as a service. So connect is how we can connect in-house loops, utilize other residues, or sell our own residues, closed loop systems. So here we have very good examples, and in the States and also in Europe, where we have, for instance, this Flow 2 system is a system, it's a platform that allows you to share spare capacity. So when you are not using very expensive tools, you can share it. It's kind of the Airbnb of the equipment, and it is out of the Netherlands, and it's working quite well. We also have this Spanish startup that is called Recircular, where you can basically source your raw materials from secondary sources. And then we have also Rubicon, that is American, and basically they have a system that allows you to recycle all your waste. So basically, by educating the consumers, you can get very good, pure streams of waste that you can then valorize. And we have the rethink. What do I mean here is by design for reuse, design for life extension, design for disassembly, for recyclability. But here you need to think a very long term. You need a cultural change, creativity, deep vertical integration. And here I give the case of Northvolt. Northvolt, if none of you knows, is the copy of Tesla in Europe. So there is an high-level manager from Elon Musk that they came in Sweden, and then they started what they claim to be the cleanest battery production in the world. So it's a gigafactory that is already at the end of their construction, and basically they are integrated vertically. So they don't have the mines, but they basically have all the value chain from the elements that compose the electrodes up to the battery itself, and then they are organizing all the ecosystem for the recycling of these batteries. And this way they can be very competitive, knowing that they have very high cost in Sweden, but they have very good clean energy to make it. And by closing the loop as much as possible, they can also be very efficient in terms of not being exposed to volatility prices, because we know most of the components of these batteries are coming from abroad. So lithium we don't have in Europe, or not in enough quantities as of today, and cobalt that is coming from Congo. So this allows them to be a bit independent from these price variations. Another case here is another of the pillars is repurpose. So give a new look, new pricing, new markets, and new users. this is a case, for instance, Volvo Remans is a new division or a spin-off of Volvo. That what they do is to refurbish old engines and give them a second life or use it as parts. The same for Philips. Philips Healthcare, also big investment, big components. They do the same thing. And a more affordable one is iFixit, that allows you to go on internet and see any way. So it teaches you how you can refurbish your own cell phone or laptop. And then we have products as a service. That is one of the very useful services that you can apply when you have a circular economy aspiration. So there you can retain the ownership of your raw material, leasing it, buyback, or give service packages. And more companies are doing that. This is the first that they started to do that was Rolls-Royce, when they started to sell, instead of selling the engines of the airplanes, they started to sell hours of flight, and they still do it. And what is interesting is that all these turbines that are mounted on these jets and fly around the world, basically they are controlled by Rolls-Royce directly. So they are optimizing in real time how these engines are working. It's really crazy. Michelin is doing the same. So they're renting the kilometer, they're renting the tires per kilometer and monitoring how they behave. SafeChem is a chemical company. So they're renting solvents that are very dirty molecules, but by renting them, they keep the ownership, and then they know how to clean them and reuse them. So a next time for reflection. So what aspects of all this presentation, based on this overview, do you think you could be more interested to explore or are more relevant for your business?
Jean-Paul, we had a question from Eve on the chat box to the Zoom group, because she couldn't speak on the microphone due to background noise.
Sorry.
So I think it's to everyone. How do you convince companies that going regenerative can be profitable for the company itself? How do you convince them?
Well, thank you very much. How do you convince companies that are going regenerative can be profitable for the company itself? Yeah, so this is a question, how do you start with it? And in my case, the first thing to do is to understand what is the motivation of the company. What does it mean to be sustainable, first of all, or regenerative for them? So by understanding what is their motivation, then we can start looking at how to introduce some practices. So first is awareness, then is to measure where they are. In this sustainability innovation, you have a lot of steps. So I do it, for instance, with a certain survey. With a survey that is holistic, you can see exactly where you are in this curve. And then you can decide how to move on. So sometimes companies, they just want to see and test what are the quick wins. The first step is just make it very quick. I mean, if I am sustainable, am I going to reduce cost? That's number one. And experience shows that if you really invest in sustainability, you start reducing costs. So it's a very good way to start. And then companies that are in the innovation thinking, they can start saying, yeah, that this brings money just by purely being sustainable, we are saving cost, and this will pay for innovation. There is a very good case of a company called Interface. Interface decided to, it's a company that was producing carpets, and they decided to go to sustainability to become zero waste and zero emissions by 2020. So they started like 50 years ago. And each time they made a decision and they went to a milestone on this sustainability transformation, each time all the cost of this transformation was paid by the savings they made. So the owner always was saying, I mean, we believed, but we got much more of our return on all the investment on this transformation were much higher than what we got. So they became number one, almost monopoly in their segment by just following a systematic transformation of the company. So I don't know if I answered the question, but to be convinced, maybe start by little, but the potential is huge. How do you value, for instance, what is the value of not having volatility in your raw materials? What is the value, for instance, of having people inspired? Because this, when you have transformation that are sustainable, people are inspired. It's very different compared to digital transformation that people are disgusted with technology in the end. But when you are sustainable, you attract talent. So it's different. And then you also have a better how do you say, image in the market. How do you value being a good, having a good image, brand, being clean?
Yeah, I think I think you answered. Thank you, Yves, for the question. Okay. Any more thoughts, questions for Jean-Paul? Well, we are almost, we are on top of the hour anyway. So, well, I think that we had something. The challenge is, yeah, Yves says, as you can all read, the challenge is pushing greenwashing companies to be clean. Okay. Well, we have recorded the webinar, and I would like to thank you all for your participation and your very candid dialogue and question. The exchange makes very much the value. And thank you, Jean-Paul, for your presentation. And I think we all have I mean, at least speaking for myself, I mean, certainly some other people had already a good understanding of these issues. But thank you for a lot of examples and making us reflect. So I've recorded the session and we'll be happy to distribute it and circulate it on the Innov website. So thanks again, Jean-Paul.
Thank you very much for sharing. It was very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you all. It was a very good pleasure to have the opportunity. Have a nice evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.